Hey, welcome. Welcome to our very first ever Zoom meeting for one thing, but also our first ever virtual book reading,
book launch,
poetry reading, book signing, all of the above. I'm Joanie Juster. This is my husband, Mark J. Mitchell, and there's a reason for the J.
The reason for the J is there are far too many people named Mark Mitchell out there.
But I married the right one.
Yeah.
So we're happy to have you. We're doing this, of course, because we can't get together in person. We had really hoped to have some fun book signing parties to launch Mark's book. And that didn't exactly happen because the world had different plans.
Yeah.
So this way, we meet virtually. You can see our Christmas wreaths. We can, there will be costume changes, by the way. There's a reason Mark is dressed in his big bus outfit. But just as a way of introduction, some of you know me, some of you know Mark. A few of you may know both of us, but just in case, a lot of people think I'm kind of a public person, but really, it turns out that Mark has been out there dealing with the public in San Francisco for 42 years. First for 30 years on street level, on Fillmore Street, you know, at two different stores. He knew everybody in the neighborhood, everybody knew him. And then for the past 8 years as a tour guide for Big Bus Tours, hence the logo branding. And where he shows people the city of San Francisco. And so he's really quite public out there. And also our neighborhood knows him very well from the late great newspaper, the monthly newspaper called The New Fillmore. Wonderful neighborhood newspaper that started in 1986. Mark, did you write for the first edition?
There might have been a poem in it, I'm not sure.
Okay, but over the years, from 1986 until it sadly ceased publication last December, Mark periodically wrote book reviews, and a lot of his poetry was published there, and people would come in to talk to him about it. So I should turn my phone off so that I'm getting text messages. Okay, so why we're here today is because Mark has published a new book called ROSHI San Francisco. And he's going to tell you, Mark, can you tell me why it's, what does the name mean? What does ROSHI mean?
ROSHI is a Zen teacher.
Okay.
ROSHI is a Zen teacher, generally an abbot of a Zen monastery. And decision publisher, the wonderful
Charles
Cunningham at Norfolk Press to call it ROSHI. And I would say, you know, the city itself is my Zen teacher, is my ROSHI.
Because you've been practicing Zen Buddhism for many years
yeah.
As a recovering Catholic
yes,
and currently practicing Buddhist. Okay, so that explains the title. I just want to give a shout out to our nephew, CJ Mitchell, who is now almost 30 years old.
Yeah.
I took that picture when I took him to the Chinese New Year parade when he was 11 years old, his first trip to San Francisco. So it's a very San Francisco picture. If you wrap around to the back of the book, you see it's Kearny Street sign. So anyhow, this book is, I was reading through it last night and I was just struck by your deep love of San Francisco.
Oh, yes, I'm a city boy, and I've fallen head over heels in love with several cities, and starting with San Francisco as soon as we got here in 1978. But, you know, I'm also, Paris knocked my socks off, New Orleans knocked my socks off, and I was born in the great city of Chicago, which is another great place except for the weather.
Hey, we love Chicago.
Yes.
But these, you mentioned in your introduction to the book that this book looks at San Francisco through a tour guide's eyes. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Well, I'm trying to show people things, point things out that they wouldn't otherwise see and they wouldn't otherwise notice. And that's the point of taking a tour with somebody, is you're gonna they're going to know things, and they're going to, you're not going to just look at the Golden Gate Bridge. You're going to look at the Golden Gate Bridge a certain way. You're going to, and it will be a different way with each and every guide too.
And you still stay in touch with your, okay, but like so many of us, Mark and I have been unemployed since March, and because all tourism just stopped.
Yeah.
San Francisco's tourism industry just died overnight, and we're still waiting. Hopefully, eventually, maybe it'll come back. But you have stayed in touch with your tour guides. How have you done that?
Well, but through Zoom, we do the Zoom once a week. We do kind of keep the band together. By just having a meeting, to get somebody to practice their bass and turn the sound off. That's what you do with bass players.
Okay. Well, and on that note, we're going to start with Mark's going to read a few poems from Roshi. The book, by the way, I think you all got this information in your invitations. We're not technical people, okay? This Zoom thing is new to us. But also I had to set up a website so that you could actually buy his books. So you can buy his books on the link that was in your invitation. I want to mention one thing. I want to give a shout out to local artist Randall Sexton. The book is filled with his gorgeous paintings of San Francisco. He really captures the spirit of the city. Every section of the book is introduced with one of his beautiful paintings. So shout out to Randall Sexton. And Mark, I'm going to get off screen while you take it away.
Okay. Well, I'm going to start with what sort of thing every tour guide hears as they head home. And it's a gospel of San Francisco. So now the tourists have been put to bed, hiding from incoming fog. The city whispers to those who welcome this gray blanket into her nesting hills. You are all holy flotsam, washed here onto your last shore, your only home. You will always carry me like a ship bottled in your fragile heart. Now let my foghorns sing you sweet to sleep. Now, again, good tour. We're going, showing you different places. And I want to start right near where we live. A block away from us is a beautiful neo-Gothic church. It's St. Dominic's Catholic Church. Been a church on that corner, Catholic Church, since 1875. This particular building finished after the earthquake in 1922. But last March, somebody broke into the church. A year ago, March 2019, and stole the sacramental records, the great big leather-bound books that keep the records of everybody's baptism, wedding, confirmation, first communion. And a week later, they returned them. So here are the sacramental records are returned to St. Dominic's. Lost names came back. They're safe in hollow stones. Birth names, married names, confirmation names. Your granddad, called Cyrus, who slept alone, was named way back for a lost saint. Hollowed stone took note, guarding sacred books, huge tomes, leather-bound, that kept its holy claim on lost names, now back in their hollow home. Names birthed, names married, the lost confirmed names. And then, like it or not, and I like it, everybody goes to Fisherman's Wharf. And this is a not so still life. And it's pretty much an exact picture of Fisherman's Wharf on Holy Thursday. The parking lot is composed of small lakes, enough to wet the tourist socks. By noon, they'll be gone. April squalls conjure whitecaps near the abandoned island, and wind croons across the wharf. These clouds float past. Bread bakes. Bread always bakes. Seagulls complete their laps. The sun blinks through the cool west as if God were flashing her face, cheering the gulls in their sad hunt. A bad guitarist nods at snapped strings, his case innocent of change as he is free of talent. The winds shift again, blowing trash past shops with hot rod t-shirts while two teenagers rearrange too short skirts. The sky returns to its dull gray, but beyond the chaliced bridge, fog lifts.
Most people don't think of Fisherman's Wharf and poetry in the same sentence. I love that you did that.
Well, I think it's a very poetic place, and I spent a lot of time there. That's where our home base is.
Well, and I worked down there too for a while at the world's worst possible job in 2014. I worked there for 6 months, and I loved going out on my lunch break to the wharf and just looking out at the water, looking out at the fog and the Alcatraz and the bridge, and looking at the tourists enjoying all of that.
Mm.
It's a beautiful thing.
Oh yes, it is. They're big adventures, and they're used to look down on them. I don't anymore.
There you go.
Now, something else San Francisco has, and nobody knows why. People will tell you they know why. They do not know why. But we have a flock of wild parrots. They're mostly concentrated on Telegraph Hill, up around Coit Tower, but you'll spot them all over the city. And this is the casita of the wild parrot. And a casita, by the way, is just kind of playing with Gabriel Garcia Lorca's take on Spanish Arabic forms, in case you were wondering. The casita of the wild parrot. Wild parrot, escaping his home hill, leaving flocks behind, looking for his name. Wild parrot, poison green and still, on a steeple, waiting chimes that might speak his name. Wild parrot, restless on a windowsill, reflected, trapped in time, repeating your name.
No fair taking my breath away. Okay.
Well, we're gonna do that again because now comes a love poem.
Uh-oh.
Now comes a love poem that's gonna take you all over the city. Also, it's another casita, which has this epigraph from Federico Garcia Lorca. The rose was not looking for science or shadow. And this is a casita for foghorns and lovers. Her morning voice joined the foghorn at the bar where it kissed the bridge. His wrapped around hers, scratchy as a barbed wire fishing boat. Mist slipped back to the islands and held there, whole and rested. The city sat clean, bright, coloratura for April, for spring. Buildings were lit, sharp, high notes riding the solid clefts of hills that kept yodeling their names, each to each, almost laughing. And she was on one hill singing an address from a different time, while his tune rose on his own hill and his style still painfully new. Silver buses slipped past cable cars. They will meet when fog sings vespers.
Which one's that?
That's a good question.
Oh, Hungry Angels.
Okay.
Ooh. Okay, now we're going back to North Beach.
Yes, we're going back to North Beach. And
somewhere here I have a map there where I mapped out all his
in,
little tour around the city.
In the other room there. Where are my Hungry Angels? They're in here somewhere. I know they're marked. But marked last night, I tell you. I did. All right. Vamping Joanie.
Yeah, so while he's looking for the poem, so he gives, at least for a few years, you were giving tours, walking tours of North Beach. So he spends a lot of his time on the bus, driving around the city, telling people about everything. But he also gives walking tours for a long time. He did North Beach, and he would meet up with folks at Washington Square. So that's one of his favorite hangouts. He also did tours, walking tours of Chinatown, and there will be a couple of Chinatown poems later. And oh, Tell them about the Barbary Coast, the short-lived but interesting Barbary Coast tour.
Barbary Coast took you through the old gold rush era parts of San Francisco, and there's even still a remains of a smuggler's tunnel there that we got to take people into. That was under an art store that sadly closed its doors actually just before the pandemic.
Yeah.
And now somebody's going to take it over, and people won't be able to go to that tunnel, which is too bad because it's pre-earthquake and really evocative and spooky and I tell people I'm not going to let them leave.
Yes, but the Barbary Coast tour came with a not safe for work warning, because the Barbary Coast was notorious for being wide open, shall we say?
Yeah.
And what was it you used to call the houses of
negotiable affection?
the houses of negotiable affection.
Yes.
that were a hallmark of the Barbary Coast. But anyhow, we are back to Washington Square
Park
so.
and the Hungry Angels. And I, by the way, alone am convinced that there is a group of angels that hang out over, around, and above Washington Square Park. But these are the Hungry Angels. They resemble the dead slightly. Faces you almost know, balanced on bodies that don't belong here. Today, in Washington Square Park, sun-washed, they light on this planet in precarious November. And
then
we're going to.
We're going down to the hate, and this is a shout out to one of my followers on Twitter who has been so supportive. You know who you are. You live in the hate, right near the park, and this one's for you.
I mean, this is the Haight Ashbury. You may have known they're the hotbed of the summer of love, and there are still all sorts of people there pretending they're their grandparents. But this is, remember, in the 60s. Time back, way back, it seemed giants would fall. Way back, just a push was all it might take. Time back, cars had bins, and everything was black and white. Time back, way back, that black and white meant more. Way back, time back, we saw the world change and change back. Time back, way back.
Speaking of way back, we're going to have a costume change now because that's how we're rolling today, I think. Okay, so while he is changing from his tour guide persona into the next batch of poems are going to be from a different book. So the first batch of poems that you heard were all from his newest book, Roshi, which if you go to his brand new funky little website that I created, it's like right there on the landing page, Roshi featured thing. But you might wonder, he's actually written a lot of books, and there are more books for sale. If you look for the little thing on the landing page that says Shop All, on Shop All, you will see all 7 of his poetry books that are still available for sale. There are a couple of them were down to the last 2 or 3 copies. But the next batch of poems are going to be from a different book, which I will introduce in just a moment. But I want to say, we've got people writing to us in the chat section. Woohoo! We love engaged viewers. And one of the poems, one of the questions here is, oh, my beloved Sister Mary Peter. Thank you, Sister Mary Peter, for helping us get back on this morning. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Mentions, I love the way Buddhism informs your poetry. Hungry ghosts over Washington Square. That really resonates. And Mary Peter also asked, you are clearly a keen observer of people and places, Mark. Can you share a bit about your writing process? Do you do it in the morning, in the moment, on site, or later? Can you talk about that?
Well, I just, out of my old jacket, my jacket pocket always has a notebook in it. So I'll write notes. I always have a pen.
Screen, sweetie.
I always have a pen. That's a union thing.
Yeah. But you've been writing since high school.
I've been writing since high school. I've over 60 years as a paid writer, because when I was 14, I actually won $100 for a short story that was awarded to me by Leonard Wimberly. who wrote The Mouse That Roared, whose children went to my school, my high school. Hence, that's the connection. That's how you know. But so I'll make notes. And there's when we get later on, there is a poem that I can tell you exactly how I wrote it. That I want to wait. So it depends. And I also do a thing, and this will come up in a few minutes too. Every year during the season of Lent, part of my discipline is to write a poem every day. And so you look at things, and when and a lot of the tour guide poems came out of, I have to write a poem today. What am I seeing? This part of San Francisco, this part of San Francisco, these people here, those people there. So that's what you go with.
But you also, I'm not a disciplined writer. I'm not a real writer. When I have to write, it's hard for me because it's kind of like revving up an engine that's been idle for a long time. Mark keeps his tools sharp by writing pretty much every day. And he gets up at an ungodly hour, somewhere around 4:30. Long before I get up, he is out here at his computer and with his books, writing, reflecting, preparing, and keeping his tools sharp. And if you follow him on Facebook, he has his personal page, but he has a page called Mark J. Mitchell Writer, Mark J. Mitchell Writer, and I'll try to put that in the chat. I think since the pandemic started, he started recording a video of him reading a poem every morning around 5:30, 6 a.m.
Those are only on my personal page.
Oh, those are on your personal page. Oh, I thought they were showing up. Okay, maybe follow him on Facebook.
Sometimes they show up on when I think particularly good one.
Right. But he's been recording these poems every day, and we're going to try to figure out, since neither of us is good at technology, we're going to try to figure out how to get those up onto a YouTube channel for him. But it's basically the discipline, just like your discipline of Buddhism.
Yeah,
writing and observing every day.
And it's hard, you look at things. That's what
you do.
Rodin told Wilke, go out and look at stuff. You're in Paris, go look at stuff. I'm in San Francisco, go look at stuff.
Okay, so this next book, catchy title, Soren Kierkegaard Witnesses an Execution. That one just flies off the shelf, right? This is an incredible book. I was frankly dubious when he titled it. It's titled after a poem by that name, which is an incredible poem, which you're going to hear. But the selection of poems here is just, it's just breathtaking. And we have 94 copies of these. So if you want a copy, now's your chance to buy one.
And it is kind of a greatest hits collection.
It's a greatest hits collection. It's so he's going to read a couple of those poems.
Starting with the title poem, Joanie does consider it to be the worst title for a book of poetry ever. But the title poem, Soren Kierkegaard Witnesses an Execution, and by way of notes, to the best of my knowledge, he never did. And a quote from the man himself, my spiritual ancestor, Soren Kierkegaard. What it means to die, of course, Adam cannot conceive. He mentioned that in The Sickness Unto Death, one of his funnier books. I look around the square and I saw fear and trembling, cold bites, fur collars drawn tight against comfortable throats. Some stood all night to be close enough for blood, to be near enough for that quick ring of axe on block. It's not the sort of death we Danes know well. Mostly we slip away in bed, revealed by a smell or old bill. We're trained, we die by the clock. My father went like that, so I built my grief into a castle, stronger, more remote than this prison. And when I left her, or rather her soul left mine, I gave it all over to the pen, again, and a pot of cold ink. I became as hard as that straight-edged block they've raised above the square. As always, I've slipped the subject like my feet slipped on the cobbles, walking through pre-dawn gloom. There he is. He's no Isaac bent under wood, obedient to his father. He's an ugly man shivering beside a priest, out of choices, out of time. It feels profound that there is no question of choice for him, for us. We could have slept later, I suppose, or I could have stayed home, like all those who think they're better than this. That's my choice. In England, they hang. He would leap into darkness and fall into empty air. He would jump outside of time instead of into it. Curious. I wonder if I'd mind. Look, the black hood, the axe glistening. It falls. Where'd it go? Oh, yeah. On a lighter note, and still staying philosophical minded, we're on our philosophical portion of the show here.
Philosophy and love.
Well, yes, we'll get to
Philosophy and love. Okay.
Yes.
All right. So hang in there. The love poems are coming.
Yes,
Okay.
but we've also got, in this case, not only is one of my spiritual ancestors, Soren Kierkegaard, another of my moral ancestors is Albert Camus, and he wrote a famous book called The Myth of Sisyphus. Well, this is Mrs. Sisyphus. Mrs. Sisyphus sighs, shaking her hoary, harried head. Men, she mourns, never look around. She sweeps away the pebbles, broken by the boulder, just to keep the pathway clear behind her heaving husband. It's important the rock rolls straight. This all could have been avoided if he'd stayed dead the first time, but I had to be a good wife, cancel all the funeral fuss. I only did what I was told. She looks at the long way up the hill and the long way back. Well, she says to no one, someone must imagine Sisyphus happy.
And by the way, I dare you to say Mrs. Sisyphus 3 times fast.
Which is why I don't.
I'm having a little trouble with my computer, so I'm having several of you have asked in the chat for the link to Mark's website. It's actually in the invitation you got, and in the invitation that you click to get in here, there's a link for Mark's poetry. I'm still going to try messing with my computer while he reads his wonderful poems. So what's next, sweetie?
Next is the small San Quentin Sutra. Having had Soren Kierkegaard witness an execution, I've never witnessed an execution, but every time the state of California has contrived to put one of its own citizens to death, I have walked 25 miles to San Quentin with a small group of dedicated opponents of the death penalty. And one of the times I wrote this. I wrote this while sitting outside the gate of San Quentin. Small San Quentin Sutra. It is impossible to be the Buddha of the death house from the outside. You may only carry images of perfect lupin in yellow broom, of a fawn breaking cover, and lay them gently in the crescent moon suspended above the east gate, knowing it's an empty gesture. We always lose too.
Well, we had a moratorium for a long time, but
Well, we still do.
we still do.
We still do right now, at least 4 years. And this poem is, I think, the best Shakespearean sonnet I've ever written. I'm not good at Shakespearean sonnets. And it's called Tenebrae, whose name will kind of explained in the poem. And it has a little epigraph from the great Kenneth Rexroth, whose name will come up again. The voices of the Benedictines are massive and impersonal. They sing the darkness, cold tones, old as stone, intoning dead syllables that no one speaks. An old record that my father once owned. I'm listening halfway through Holy Week. It is, my mind knows, an archaic rite, mothballed by a dead pope when I was born. It feels right, apt, on this cool, graying night, while rags of my deserted faith flap, torn around my guilt-fed soul. A candle glows. I may light some more to brighten my doubts, because this is the rite of shadows. Once I was taught just what it was about. The record ends, and there's nothing done. I extinguish the candles one by one.
And for those of us who didn't go to Catholic school for 12 years, can you please explain Tenebrae?
Well, Tenebrae is a rite of mourning. It's one of the Holy Week rites on Good Friday.
Okay.
Um, as you lead up to the crucifixion. And it's basically a prayer, and it was Pius, Pope, the last Pope Pius, stopped, kind of got rid of that as part of the Easter Holy Week liturgy in 1955, which is the year I was born.
Okay, then.
You asked.
But for our viewers at home,
Yeah.
you can see that Mark's life and his poetry are largely informed by ritual. 12 years of Catholic school and being an altar boy will do that. Then his daily practice of Buddhism includes that. He is a man of habit, let me tell you. I can set a clock by him, which you can never say about me.
And I used to have a Franciscan habit, but the moss got to it.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Now it's time for a love poem for her.
Okay, so I'm just going to make all y'all jealous. I'm married to a poet, and a really talented poet, and a man who I adore deeply. And for the past 46 years, I've had the pleasure and the privilege, and yeah, it's a real privilege to wake up many mornings to find an incredible poem written for me on the kitchen table waiting for me when I wake up. I'm spoiled rotten. It's really, I personally think that his love poems are among the best in the English language, and he needs to be celebrated widely for these. And I just cannot fathom how I inspired all of these. But being a muse doesn't pay much, but it's really good work. So take it away.
Okay, this one, family members will have heard this at a couple of weddings because it's been a favorite at weddings. And it's called After Aragon. It's my favorite Camille Pinko French poet. They would not believe me when they see me choosing loaves, inhaling herbs, picking this one, discarding another. They wouldn't understand me if they noticed as I rubbed papery garlic between two palms. If I told them I'm contriving a bouquet of flavors as an act of worship I hope will prove worthy of your mouth. They could not believe me when they bought their wine if I told them, even now I am devising a rose out of my trembling fingers, whose intricate petals and thornless stems might grow luxurious enough to brush your skin. They will not believe me as I bend and break words to read your name. They will think the wrong thing entirely because they cannot believe that I am now. I am every second. I am in every syllable, every breath, that I am always and everywhere, that I am nothing but your lover.
Excuse us. Thank you, sweetie. Okay, now that I'm all verklempt. Yeah, it's time for another costume change.
This is like slight constant change.
Okay, and a change of tone. So the next 4 poems are theme of family and his parents. Getting a guy like this is not by accident. His parents, Joe and Dorothy Mitchell, were just the most. God, I was so lucky to marry into this family. Hi, all of you Mitchells out there. I know there's some of you on this right now. But Joe and Dorothy Mitchell taught him how to be a wonderful man and a wonderful husband, and I'm deeply grateful for them. And this first poem he's going to read, June 6, 1964, I'm going to see if I can do a screen share on this while he's reading. His dad, Joe Mitchell, how old was he when he signed up for World War II?
No, he didn't sign up. He was drafted.
He was drafted, but
so
okay.
it's probably 18,
Yeah. I mean, young Joe Mitchell went to war, leaving behind.
21.
Yeah, very young, and and served not only in the European theater, but also just when he thought he was done and could come home and marry his sweetheart, no, he got shipped off to the Pacific as well. So he served in both theaters. I'm just so in awe of his service, and but as anybody who's been in the service or who knows people who have been in the service know, fighting a war does things to you. It leaves you with scars, both either physical or emotional. And so I'm going to let you introduce. This is one of Mark's most popular poems. It's been published a number of times.
It's June 6, 1964, which was the 20th anniversary of the D-Day invasion. And essentially a true story as far as what happened to the little boy in the poem and then the older man in the poem. It seems so old, but he wasn't. It's only 42.
Oh, geez. Oh, geez.
Night. I had pneumonia. Scooped from bed. I was 8. He carried me. His limp jarred me in front of the television. I want you to watch this. Cronkite and Ike on Omaha Beach. Steel teeth in the tide. I watched feverish whining. He drank, talked. I don't think I heard the newsman, but my father. No, I wasn't there. No, I was in San Luis, training. It was later, after the Battle of the Bulge. I know you're sick, but listen to me. Rangers scaled the cliffs here and at Sword Beach. Yes, I served under Eisenhower. Everyone did. He was the top man. I was in artillery, cannons, 105 howitzers. There's a picture of one. Yes, they're big. They killed a lot of people. Yes, I killed a lot of people. In the chill hours of dawn, the Allies landed on the continent. No, I didn't shoot people close up, except once. Dry kleine Kinder. He showed me a picture. Do you understand? 3 small children. He fixed another drink. I hurt tonight, my arthritis. Dry kleine Kinder. He was a prisoner, a small town in Germany. I was guarding him. He was a bastard, SS officer. Do you know what that means? The German high command was baffled by a sleeping Hitler. Special forces, yes, especially bad. Not just a soldier like me. He must have liked it. He must have liked Hitler. No, I didn't like it. No, I didn't like cannons. Dry, kleine Kinder. It was like this. We stood around him and this bastard. No, that doesn't mean German. It means a bad man. No, I don't mean the SS guy. We pause now for station identification. An American, a bad one. Yes, there were bad Americans. Taunted him, teased him, made him run. I was the guard. What could I do? I had to shoot him. No, Tommy guns are only good for night fighting, really. Dry kleine Kinder, dry kleine Kinder. But he was a bastard and I was his guard. And I haven't slept in 2 days because of it. So I woke you up to tell you this program was produced by CBS News.
Just going to take a moment because that one always gives me chills just to think of what your dad went through. And I'm so grateful that you memorialized his service in verse. And speaking of memorializing your family, time for one about your mom.
I mentioned that I write a poem every day in Lent. In 1999, that was the Lent in which my father passed away, and my mother had passed away a year and a half before. This is the only one of those sets that has been published completely as such. I mean, because when you're going to write a poem every day, you do have to lower your standards sometimes.
Yeah.
But this was a big event. So we're going to start, though, as a prelude called Mater Familias, which is a Latin word I made up, but it means mother of the family. She glows thin, small, in the large chair, light as a bird with hollow bones, a transparent tube traces the hallway like Ariadne's thread, binding her breath to this world. She holds the newspaper tight, proud enough to offer this disease to God. An exaltation of grandchildren, followed close by an argument of offspring, spill into the room. She folds the paper crisp and gathers them in her iron tenderness, touching without moving each and every one. So that was my mother and my father, and this is them together. My parents enter swing time. Their ghosts are too busy to haunt this house tonight. Somewhere, Glenn Miller has finished rehearsing and is waiting for their entrance. Here they come, two figures, eternally young, impossibly elegant, more graceful than they ever were on this heavier sphere. They're ready to dance and forever in the mood. Strike up the band.
I just love that. Your parents were such a great couple. Yes, absolutely wonderful. So much love. I don't know how to see who's on this event today. I'm hoping my big brother Jimmy is on. Sadly, Bonnie couldn't figure out how to get on. I'll send her the recording. But Jimmy actually requested this poem, that this poem be read. It's again one of Mark's biggest hits. It gets published. And in fact, it's been anthologized in Garrison Keillor's Good Poems, American Places. Not only is my big brother a fan of poetry and a fan of Mark's poetry, but he's a fan of baseball, as are, you can tell Mark and I are, oh, another costume change, oh my God. Yes, so this poem encompasses both baseball and love and the Midwest, all those good things. And this is, we're in a new book now, right?
Yes, this is from, yeah.
Okay, so let's, first of all, I think I finally succeeded in posting the right link for the for Mark's website. So Lent 1999, we're down to our last few copies of those. The Mitchell nieces and nephews should probably all have copies of that. And then starting from Tufu, God, I love this book. This is just a gorgeous book. This one came out earlier this year?
Late last year. This year, like February, I think.
February, okay. And it's just gorgeous. And I'm going to just brag about my husband for a minute. I want to read the one of the blurbs on the back because he has blurbs from a couple of very famous people. One of them says, Mark J. Mitchell's poems of diverse forms, villanelles, sestinas, triolets, and the like, and the unlike, have in their own uncommon way the well-crafted composure to carry all the weight and weightlessness of song. It's no wonder that for the last 40 years, he's been a constant presence on our common literary landscape, says Mary Jane White from the National Endowment for the Arts in Poetry and Translation.
She's a great translator of the Russian.
Ah, okay, well, there you go. So this book features a lot of different forms. Yeah. Before you do that, let's just talk about forms for a minute. What's your philosophy of poetry? I mean, what makes a poem?
Oh, that's a good question. If I were teaching a class on writing poetry, that would be my question. Is each time somebody came with something, said, "Tell me why that's a poem." And where Lawrence Ferlinghetti recently said, wrote an essay saying most of what is being passed off as poetry these days is just chopped up prose. In my studying days at UC Santa Cruz with Raymond Carver and George Hitchcock and Barbara Hall, who all taught me a lot. We were all writing free verse, and you were taught to pay attention to your rhyme breaks and or your line breaks, and if somebody was read a poem differently than the way they broke the line, broke up their music, you kind of correct them. I started writing in the fixed forms. Really, I wrote 1987. I wrote a sonnet sequence called the Lenten Sonnets when the friend of my youth was going through a serious health problem. Let's just leave it at that. And it was the only way I could talk about it was to keep it in sonnets. And ever since then, in part because, George Hitchcock, one of my teachers, said, "I think everything's been done with rhyme and candy." And I said, "Ha, I'm going to show you." Uh, and I like them. They tend to concentrate the form, the poetry more, and even if it's not a poem, it's at least definitely verse, which, chopped up prose is not. This poem that I'm going to read is actually written on a Fibonacci sequence in terms of arranging the stanzas. Yes.
This guy. I mean, this guy.
And
Okay.
with rhymes.
All right, go for it.
She asked.
And I was there that night. This is about one of our baseball vacations.
Yes.
Yes.
This is minor league rainout, Iowa. So minor league cap, San Francisco Seals. Even today, the sun gone missing, sky sodden all over gray, wind bursting umbrellas. Today, I can remember everything. The small ballpark in Iowa, young athletes in cheap caps, waiting for the wind to stop, rains to go away, so the game could start. The grounds crew smoking by the tarp spool, a drain pipe really, calm, ready to do their act, and brats on coals hissing as raindrops pop their casings. Blue-white lightning in the south, playing tag with light towers, the huge river swelling, rolling away. Even today, must be the storm. While we walked the wet streets, we knew the game was holy and the rain was sacred. We turned chairs facing the Travelodge window, got warm, watched the rain, the river, the blue-black streets. Strangers from out of state, transfixed by weather, just sitting, looking as clouds and lightning formed new toys for God. I looked at you, though you didn't know, wet, wild, fey, as you looked at the sky, wishing there were words for this. Now, transformed to memory, it comes back, new, born by a cold and rainy day. Your eyes, your wet hair are kissing.
Well, okay then. We've got 12 minutes left, and I've got to like 12 poems here. So we're
Okay, well, we're going to do a couple of short ones from artifacts and relics to move us back to San Francisco.
This is a beautiful little book. I just love this one. And this is.
Well, first we have another gospel. This one is lost. It's a lost gospel.
I'm going to take care of some lighting.
He's going to take care of some lighting in the meantime. Jesus knocks on Peter's forehead like a cop without a warrant. But the old rock is sleepy. He grumbles, rolls right over, scratching his sea gray beard. So that persistent savior knocks again, calling his name. Too early, too early. The fish are still asleep. The first pope murmurs. I'm not your wife, my thick friend, says that pounding carpenter. We have to go to the mount. There's a sermon to be preached. But Peter lies there snoring. The Messiah smiles and sighs. Blessed are the sleepyheads. I'll have Matthew write it down. And then here's an artifact inspired by an essay by Lou Welch, a San Francisco beat poet, called Bread versus Mozart's Watch. I am the artist formerly known as Mozart. The Archbishop has taken back my red coats. The Emperor is no longer interested. Someone has offered me a fine watch, but I gave it, under the prodding of wine, to a poet from a future called San Francisco, named Lou, who promptly pawned it.
Okay then.
Okay.
It looks like we're up for another costume change.
Just minor movie.
Because we're going back to San Francisco poems now. Which book are we diving into? We're going back to ROSHI.
Yes.
All right. And let's see. Which part of the city are you going to start in there?
Chinatown.
Chinatown. Okay.
And I wrote this poem in a pocket notebook while standing in the rain in Union Square after having taken the 30 Stockton bus through Chinatown. It's called the last photo studio in Chinatown. Photo studios, people took formal portraits, um, and they're going away. I mean, they're just being lost. The Chinese community, Chinese American community, is very big on formal portraits, weddings, somebody when they're in uniform. Every year, families would have them taken. And I just saw one that was closing up. The building wasn't being torn down, but for artistic purposes, it is.
Okay.
But I'm still standing there in the rain in Union Square, writing this. It's a sestina, which is a really tricky form. So I had to look up the form on my phone before I could write it. The last photo studio in Chinatown. He rolls up his fading backdrops and waits for the truck to come, remembering high-pitched cries of babies, soldiers' stone faces, brides' smiles. His hands are just invisible f-stops, missing the sharp smell of developer and fixatives. That iron gray developer didn't care about that. He licked his lips, dropped the card. He knew he couldn't be stopped, and he ordered the wreckers to come that day. They were all calluses and smiles. He was stoic. His wife cried the same way she would cry when the kids married. That developer promised wealth, but those times, he said, smile will vanish like today's raindrops. Time slides on. He knew this would come. Technology can never be stopped. So his exposure knowledge and f-stop lore will fade. No point in crying. Their life had been good. The one to come, well, that would just develop like a picture with a new backdrop. He knew how to hold on to a smile. He'd paste it on his face. He'd smile for her. He'd try hard to stop her tears, and they slipped and dropped to the naked floor. He seldom cried these days. He'd watch what developed, wait for the latent image to come. Those scavengers were due to come back. He'd fix his face, his professional smile, like a proof sheet he'd developed. Nobody, even if they tried, could stop this. Babies would still cry, and old men and old tasks would be dropped off the earth. That backdrop would come apart. All those cries, all those smiles, well, they just stop, undeveloped. And now,
Another costume change. Okay, can you see? Can you see that? So last year, 2019, in January, one of San Francisco's most iconic citizens, Lawrence Ferlinghetti, celebrated his 100th birthday. And we've both been fans of Ferlinghetti's from day one. Well, not since 100 years, but since we were old enough to read poetry.
We were there. We got the T-shirt.
And there was a big celebration at City Lights Books. All of North Beach celebrated. We were there to celebrate with them. And Mark, of course, wrote a poem for Larry Ferlinghetti as a 100th birthday present, and it's called
100-Year Hoopty-Doodle.
Yes.
How does it feel to wear 100 circles around the sun? From after the war that didn't end wars to our right now wars that never end. Though you're good through your good war and all our bad wars. Were they slow? Were they quick? Spinning around the sun, passing from big bad bop to beatbox, from your left bank to no one's west bank. And all the books you birthed and all the poets you raised, all of them, and your multiplied lovers, were your circles quick? Were they slow? And this city you sang, and no one ever sang it better, bathing in the light that circles around you as you 100 times circle the sun.
Woohoo! That's a hoopty-doodle.
That's a hoopty-doodle.
That's a hoopty-doodle.
Damn straight, that's a hoopty-doodle.
Okay. All right, we're getting down to, okay, we've got 5 minutes left. I think I managed to succeed in putting the link into the chat because some of you have been buying books, and I want to give a shout out. I'm going to be actually, before he signs the books, I want to email each of you and find out how you want them signed, because I don't know if you want some of them as gifts for other people. But thanks to Rhoda Haberman, thank you so much. And Brita and Rhoda are from our book groups that we've been in for many years. Chris Barral.
Yep, my old pal from the wine business.
Yay, hey Chris, and say hi to your husband for me.
And a poet in her own right.
And a poet in her own right. James and Sharon Leeper, oh my God, you guys, so supportive all these years. And somebody from high school, from Bishop Montgomery High School?
Yep. Yep. Jimmy Andrade. Yep.
Jimmy Andrade, hello. Hope to meet you someday. Norma Sita, Matthew Mitchell, love you. And Andy Wong, and Sister Mary, otherwise known as Brad Colby. I can't tell you how much I love you. And thanks for getting us up and running today. And who's it? Oh, another one. Stan and David, thank you so much. So we'll be signing those books, but I'll need to contact you to find out how you want them signed. And hey, if you're in the city and you want to do a live pickup rather than having me ship them, I can refund your shipping cost, but you'll get Christmas cookies. If you pick up your book, touchless, safe, distanced pickup, you get Christmas cookies. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, we're gonna go to his last North Beach tour.
His would be you.
His would be me.
Okay.
The person mentioned at the end, Elvis Christ, was a literal San Francisco street poet. He wrote his poetry on the streets of San Francisco on masking tape in North Beach until he was a junkie. He passed away about 1.5 years ago. And a hell of a nice guy. And he had one of my poems over his desk. But his last North Beach poem tour, heroic ghosts trail him, soft as flags, still hip after decades in books. Words drop from trees in Washington Square. They lodge in pavement, his route's a circle. He talks it all twice. Spiced air floats above pale girls with dark lips. Italian drifts on the 4 o'clock breeze. He guides, his voice lowered, not a lament, a prayer to honor the late Elvis Christ. And for public transport fans.
So I'm on Twitter, and for some reason, a lot of the people I follow and who follow me are like enormous fans of public transit. So this is a shout out to all of you public transit fans out there.
And if you don't know, Muni is our public transport system. This is the Muni Sutra. The Muni Dharma rolls in fits and starts. It keeps you off balance, but it is alive with electricity. The Muni Dharma sounds with a chorus of bells caused by tugged cords, pulled by people as empty as you. The Muni Dharma exhorts you to count the loud exaltations of breath, air brakes, and to notice the horn. The Muni Dharma does its job. It takes you from one place to another. Once you're there, it leaves you behind.
So there. And you have time for one last poem, and then we'll do some wrap up.
Okay, well, then one last poem I'm going to give you instead of the one Joanie. This book is named Roshi is Empty City, and this is for the city as it is now under pandemic conditions. Because foghorns still paint the eastward sky, piercing the pink faint light with low songs. Because a red bridge can carry one car, pulling the lone ferry floating to dawn. Because there's a tower and a beach called North, one breathless walker resting at its top. Because a rogue pyramid hides below glass, and glass light slides down its empty slope. Because forever, a kiss of lost gold, a small promise in the cooling air. Because she doesn't brag but shows off. It's San Francisco, West's last prayer.
Wow. Thank you, Mark, for all these incredible poems. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you for all of you who have been buying books. Lucy McAvoy in Ireland, we're going to contact you directly to see about how to ship books to Ireland. So don't do it on the website. We'll do that directly with you. Andy, hi Andy, wants to thank you for writing about the May Photo Studio in Chinatown. And and if you're ever in Cafe Zoetrope in North Beach, there's a vending machine that spits out poems. His poems are in there. His poems are in vending machines.
In one of them, who knows? It's a random shot. Take your shot.
There are vending machines all over the world.
Yep.
Thank you all. If you have any questions, you can email us, email me personally or email Mark. Our contact information is in the invitations you got. And this show will be saved on YouTube, I believe. So thank you all.
Thanks
Happy
so much.
holidays.
Thanks.
Stay
Thanks.
safe out there. Stay distant, stay safe. We love you all.
And I'd love to lead you around the streets of San Francisco when we get to do that again.
Yes, yes, indeed. Okay. Now we have to figure out how to end this thing. Okay.
Okay,
So bye, everybody. Okay. And
so there's N, but what did Mary Peter say about
okay.
that?
Okay. So hit end, but you don't stop recording yet.
Okay.
So you don't leave the meeting. You end the meeting for all.
Okay.